In this video, we're going to go over my May forecast and break it down for you week by week. But first, we're going to take you back to the month of April because it was a very active month for tornadoes. In fact, it was the second most active April on record. So far, very preliminary numbers as of April the 29th. We had 273 tornadoes. So overall, we've had 37 EF2s, 9 EF3s, and 1 EF4. And the National Weather Service is still doing their surveys, likely for another week or so to come up with the final number, but that number would likely climb to actually over 300 for the month of April. And I do feel that one of the main reasons why we had such an active month, because overall, you can see the overall temperature anomalies for the entire month. This is your average mean. So if you take all the highs and all the lows and average it together over those 30 days, this is what you come up with. Mainly across the central and eastern 2/3 of the US, you can predominantly see anywhere from 3 to overall 5 degrees above average within this orange shaded area. But those areas out west, right? For those areas are in the Pacific Northwest, we had a lot of troughs out west. That typically, set the stage for that sharp temperature gradient and those negatively tilted troughs that did come in. And that spelt trouble for multiple rounds of severe storms throughout the month. And as it ended up being a very active month and also a wet month as well. So here's the overall precipitation over the last 30 days. You can actually see the graph on the right-hand corner of the screen here. Yeah, it's pretty wet, right? Overall, April is a wet month, but this one was even wetter for a good part of the US, with those troughs that came in off the West Coast, left a dosing of rain across the West Coast, lighter amounts as you swung through the portions of the Four Corners regions. But yes, once you got east of the Continental Divide, it really started to ramp up. And once it took advantage of the Gulf of Mexico here, a lot of these areas in purple actually had over a foot of rain for the entire month in portions of Texas and Louisiana and pockets of Missouri, as well as Illinois and Indiana. Heavier amounts in Pennsylvania here, but you can even see the red shaded areas anywhere from 2, 4, even upwards to 6 inches of rainfall, throughout the month. So I appreciate all my subscribers out there. If you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns, hit the subscribe button and you're in. You get all my daily updates on this channel, and I would love to reach 250,000 subscribers. So you can help me get there by subscribing to the channel and following all my daily breakdowns. So here's the setup going forward. So we rolled the calendar. This is May 1st, and you can actually see we've got two areas of concern. We've got a more active subtropical jet coming off that subtropical low. We still are in El Nino type dynamics, and that is continuing to remain active, pummeling in all that deep moisture. And once it takes advantage of the Gulf of Mexico, it has that lift. And further to the north, we've got a parade of storms. We've got one's going to be highlighted across areas of Colorado. We got another one diving into the Pacific Northwest, and yet we have another one coming in back behind it from the Aleutian Islands. All these are just going to be conveyor belt of low pressure centers. And as that system taps into that well above average temperature anomalies and cooler anomalies out west with that negatively tilted trough, that typically spells trouble for more storms underway in a lot of the same areas that have actually seen a lot of activity. In fact, today, yet we have another enhanced risk. We had 13 tornado reports yesterday. And yes, we have another enhanced risk activating the storms off the dry line out in West Texas, Western Oklahoma. Things get going into the heat of the afternoon, into the early evening time frame, and then they will push across Texas and numerous flood watches down here in this region. In fact, there is even a moderate risk for excessive rainfall. So these likely will produce more tornadoes out west and some larger hail, and then start to weaken into the overnight hours as they move from west to east across areas of the south. And overall, if you look for the next 5 days, we're going to predominantly keep that same type of pattern that we actually had in April. So those areas, again, from the 1st through that 6th time frame, those areas across areas of the South and much of the Southeast and the Ohio Valley and much of the Northeast is going to continue to remain on the above average side. And that trough continues to remain out west with those multiple parade of storms that are coming in. That's going to keep these temperature anomalies down and keep this temperature gradient alive and well. And that's going to spell more trouble for heavier rainfall and likely more severe storms. So even between now and Monday morning time frame, yes, with those parade of storms tapping into the active subtropical jet stream, you put a bullseye across these areas into areas of the central US with more heavy rain across Texas into Louisiana, back into Oklahoma, into Arkansas, as well as Kansas and Missouri, going up to Nebraska and to Iowa. Those are going to be the favorite areas. And as these continue to push further east, they will weaken, and also the rainfall estimates will weaken as well. But you're still going to get anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of rainfall over the next 5 days across the Ohio Valley and much of the Northeast. But overall, heading into that first full week of May, so you're talking May 16th through that 13th time frame, and this is very concerning, folks. We have yet even another trough coming in out west, and then we've got the the lift mechanism coming off the Gulf of Mexico, and there is your sharp temperature gradient starting on Monday. And this could be also another multi-day severe weather outbreak unfolding across the plains and probably much of the Ohio Valley as well. And I think things get kicked going on Monday. Even right now, the Storm Prediction Center has a day 6 risk out there for a lot of the same areas across Nebraska through Kansas into Oklahoma and far northwest portions of Texas. I think this will obviously get expanded, and that will push across much of the Ohio Valley and eventually maybe even swing into western portions of Pennsylvania. So, but I'm looking, especially Monday to Thursday next week, looks really active for severe storms, and unfortunately could lead to another tornado outbreak across that region. But what's going to happen further south, we're going to start to see some ridging, some new development, some ridging starting to build coming in out of Mexico, and all that moisture that's left the ground. And once you got the southwest winds, yes, that is a moderate to a slight risk for excessive heat, folks. This is the first of the season. The Climate Prediction Center put this out because we are in the month of May, and we are looking for some near record high temperatures across this region. And then on top of the dew points, with the higher dew point, and that puts some of the heat index well above average for this time of year. Some of these areas would be over 100 degrees. Further south, it could be pushing 110 down there into South Texas as far as the heat index. And even actually actual temperatures, even Laredo could get near that 110 range by next Thursday time frame. But overall, we're seeing the El Nino start to crash. So we're in that transitional phase right now. We are still getting that El Nino type dynamics with the much more active subtropical jet stream. But I do feel over time that's going to start laxing. We're seeing the first beginning stages of that, of the ridging starting to build out of Mexico, lifting into the southeast, lifting into South Texas. And I think that will slowly start to push a little bit further north the deeper we get into the month of May. But overall, you can see the trend. There is the trend on the El Nino. In fact, we're actually out of El Nino characteristics and more of an Enso neutral now. And you can see all the cooler pooling anomalies down there in Equator Pacific. That is a drastic change than what we saw during the winter months. Now that we're transitioning, it's the transitioning phase out of El Nino going into Enso neutral. We don't really stay in neutral very long, and likely we're heading back into that La Nina by the time we head into the heart of summer. So, but overall for next week, yes, that's concerning. We still see that same look, right? We got that same look of all the below average temperature anomalies with the parade of storms coming in off the Aleutian Islands. And then we've got the winds, we've got the, excessive heat further south, and that's going to draw in those higher, dew points further north as well. And that's going to be tapping into this sector, and that's going to be setting the stage likely for multiple rounds of severe storms, which all kicks off on Monday again. And because, yes, we have another negatively tilted trough coming in on Monday, and I think it really starts to amplify across the center part of the US even on Tuesday. So it's going to put all these areas back into the plains. Likely this one would extend into the Ohio Valley and likely put Ohio eventually back in the picture for severe storms by probably Wednesday. And that could even extend even into portions of Pennsylvania by the time we get into next Thursday. So if we break it down on the overall learning model right now, you can see the highlighted areas across Monday. So the Storm Prediction Center has already highlighted the risk with the trough out west, and you got the ridging in the middle part of the country. That spells trouble across the plains and much of the the Great Plains region. And I think that really starts to get going on Tuesday as well, back into a lot of the same areas that don't need any more severe storms, folks. So yes, this is not a good situation that likely unfolds, and it's going to be a multi-day event, because even on Wednesday, this is probably going to be continue to push off into the Ohio Valley and put these areas into Kentucky, into Tennessee, as well as Indiana, back into severe storms and tornado potential, as well as Ohio, and as well as portions of West Virginia. And I think this even extends even further off to the east, likely include portions of Pennsylvania by the time we head into Thursday. But overall, for that second week of, May there, here is your overall precipitation. So I do feel continue to remain dry for a good part of the desert Southwest and much of California. We got the parade of storms coming in. It's not till you get east of the Continental Divide that it really starts to activate. And I think this is the bullseye where not only you're going to get the heavier rains, but likely where you're going to get the severe storms as we head into next week. So definitely look out for another active week ahead coming up. But I do feel once we get towards the middle of the month, I think things are going to change a little bit. So we've been active. We're going to be active again for another likely 2 weeks. But we do see signs with more ridging starting to build out west, and a trough will come in off into the northeast. Now that typically shuts off the Gulf of Mexico, and you have a lot less storm activity for that third week. We're talking like May 15th through that May 22nd timeframe. So I do feel we're going to get a little bit of a lull into the storm activity, which is going to be a good thing. And the same thing with the CFS kind of implies that with the ridging starting to come back once we hit like the 15th to the 16th of the month, has a fairly decent significant trough coming in. That puts these areas back into play as far as moderate rain showers and stuff, but likely not severe, and some cooler anomalies actually coming back in the picture where you'll hit like 90 tomorrow in Washington, D.C. So, but overall, with that trough coming in and the ridging slowly starting to build, and with the Gulf of Mexico shut off, it's going to put a drier week for those areas into the south, much of the southeast. And that puts the storm placement with that trough coming in from the northwest off to the southeast through the Ohio Valley and through much of the mid-Atlantic and the northeast, to put these areas across the Dakotas, through areas of Minnesota, through areas of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, back into Pennsylvania, back into New York, and those areas into the northeast would likely be the most active areas for that third week of May. But unfortunately, it does appear going into that last week of May, we likely have cooler anomalies, another trough that would likely come in from the west, and that likely puts the above average severe weather aspects back into play for a good part of the central and eastern 2/3 of the US. So if we break this thing down for you as far as the entire month, I do feel this is going to look like a little bit like what April did. So you're going to have these significant troughs that are likely going to be coming in from those Pareto systems coming in off the Aleutian Islands. That's going to put the cooler anomalies predominantly from the Pacific Northwest, much of areas into California, dropping down to possibly even into Utah overall for those 30-day temperature anomalies. But overall, the central and eastern 2/3 of the U.S. is going to remain likely above average for the entire month overall mean temperatures, and that overall puts that above average, severe storms for the most part of the May, with the exception of that little bit of a lull I do feel that's going to come for that third week of May. So if you break this thing down for you, as far as like precipitation anomalies, May is a wet month. It's likely typically the wettest month of the year, but you can see the difference between the above average anomalies. So that's actually a lot of rainfall. When you're calling above average for these areas across the South, that means you're going to get a lot of rainfall for the South. All these areas across the green, back into the Dakotas, through Minnesota, through the Great Lakes, through the Ohio Valley, and much of the Northeast. Where you're going to likely see more ridging and less likely to see less storms is the Southeast. And the further south you live, and much of the desert Southwest will likely miss out on a lot of the rain, and they won't get any severe storms either. But overall, if you break this thing down for you, as far as like precipitation, yes, those are amounts upwards to possibly 8 inches, and a good part of those areas in Texas, into Oklahoma, Arkansas. This is your main storm track into Kansas, back into Missouri, through Iowa, back into portions of Minnesota, into Wisconsin. You're going to have another pocket of energy move through the Ohio Valley and could pick up some significant rains through that region of Kentucky, back into West Virginia, as well as Pennsylvania. Notice the drier slot out into the Southwest. So you're going to have these Pareto systems going to be coming in from the Pacific Northwest, move across, tapping into the Gulf of Mexico, really amplifying this region across the central and southern plains, and that will move across the Ohio Valley. And then once it gets back into the Northeast, have a little bit of lighter amounts. But yes, it's going to be a wet month and a very active month ahead. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Make sure you do like this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and catch me next update, why I protect you before and after storm.